Well, hello, this is your host Eric of GMODISM, and we're back here in From the Depth, of course. Today we are doing the, I guess long-awaited AI and maneuvers tutorial. This will be a little bit of a longer tutorial, that is certain, but in this video you will learn basically how to set up the AI for any vehicle. Now, this is not a complete guide to build any of those vehicles. That will of course be separate tutorials if they do not exist already. I would highly recommend some of the tutorials we already made, like for example the it's not called how to boat anymore, it is called how to build a ship beginner's guide or something like that. Anyways, here we are in From the Depth. It's absolute jank. We have to click middle click. I don't know. It's weird. So there we are. We are inside the game, and we should begin with just clearing up everything. By the way, if you want to have some custom Army of GMODISM backgrounds to mix in with the in-game backgrounds, they are downloadable for free if this is something you want. They are in our workshop, our Google Drive, together with a lot of other things, of course, like the Gimli Challengers. A lot of you have been asking where to get them. The most of them there are in Google Drive, or not all of them, but if you have a Challenger to the Gimli that you haven't shared there yet, please put it there. Anyways, get into Discord as well. It can be pretty useful. We should, in any case, let's get going. So we should be clicking B and just building a little vehicle here. We are, to be able to test out the AI functions of the different kinds, we are going to set up a very basic little build. And if you're wondering why we make a build like this, we want something that is floaty but still has some weight, because if we don't have that, we might have a little bit of some issues later on. Because it's gonna be hard to make stuff work if we don't have enough weight. Because blocks in From the Depth aren't exactly light, so they'll just fly around and act all crazy if we don't have to weight some back it with. So we make some metal and wood here. Yes, indeed. So here we have our little testing vehicle. It's pretty unoptimized, of course, but it will be able to do anything, basically. We will basically change what type of propulsion it has, dependent on what we set it up as. But for the purposes and testing, we are going to use ion thrusters mainly. They provide pretty bad thrust and stuff like that. But they work underwater, over water, doesn't matter very much. Just so you know what we are up to do. In any case, I spawned a little AI system here. This is just a little AI template thing. So you should, we have some better guides and stuff on doing that. God damn it, it doesn't even look connected, but whatever. In any case, we need some type of detection as well. Now, detection is not quite the scope of this video. It's not very important. But this is how to set up the AI. It's not how to set up detection, right? What we are going to do... Yeah, it's impossible to put everything in one video if we don't want to make it a lot of hours long. But what you can do is having some of these. These are wireless snoopers. They will catch some detection signals. Over water, underwater, doesn't matter. Very bad for accuracy and stuff like that, but it can be a really good idea to have a couple of these to just have some type of idea where the enemy is. Now, I will say this, just a little quick guide on detection. Just a little quick guide. We'll make proper instant tutorials about this, but right now, what you need to know is that if you don't know what detection you need, you probably are absolutely fine with having a system like this. This little detection rod, some connection points, so it's can see. And on top of that, you'll go and select the laser rangefinder, have it there. And on top of that, you have a 360 camera. Then you make sure that the 360 camera can go in all the directions, left, right, front, and back like that. Then it will see. The laser rangefinder works a little bit differently, but you want it to have about as well line of sight as possible. This is a optimal minimum detection. You probably want to have enough of the general processing powers so that you get up to 100%. Note that these ones won't work underwater. If you're having something that has to see underwater, you will need a sonar. You can have a passive sonar and you can have a active sonar. When it comes to the 360 variants, they are good for smaller craft and good as backup and excellent if you don't need to aim very properly. When it comes to the 90-degree versions, having a 90-degree version in each direction is better than having like a lot of the 360 variants. So the 90-degree versions, like the 90-degree camera, for example, sonar, radar, they are very good in the direction they are looking at. And for them, you of course only need to see that it has clear sight forwards. It's the same for exhausts, you know. It's just a straight line forwards that is checked for detection. But when it comes to trackers, I know it's really stupid. They kind of depend on actual line of sight. So you'll have to imagine that you're inside of there. And could you see all over the place? Probably yes. In from the depth, there is also this thing, munition warners. They don't need to be connected up to AI. They can be placed anywhere. It's weird. I don't know why. They don't work underwater, but yeah, they provide detection on incoming projectiles. However, in a update a few years ago in From the Depths that some players and people may not know, is that actually visual cameras, visual radars, of course passive radars and passive sonars, pick up the radar signature of incoming radar, seeker missiles, incoming sonar torpedoes. The active radar can actually see the they can actually see the missiles coming in too. If you're having very accurate APS cannons that are not too fast, or maybe you're having cram cannons, these coincidence rangefinders are a necessary part to have because they can provide the best detection in the direction they are facing for bearing values. You can see here that the angular error in the bearing to target is 0.05. So they're very, very accurate at watching the bearing, which is super important when we are dealing with incoming, ships, airships, things like this, and we need to hit them with our slow APS or slow cram. So that's really useful. Now, for really fast targets, IR and IR with like a gimbal tracker, so the IR camera can detect, and the 360 camera can detect very fast targets. Like for example, if you have some incoming fighters, they are jet fighters. Jet fighters obviously have a heat signature from their jet engine. And with the IR tracker, you can kind of track them so that you can shoot them down easier. It's of course best to have everything, but that's really expensive. Radar is really good for big targets again, and can also track incoming missiles, so that's pretty cool. So here we have some different options, but in general, Laser rangefinder and visual camera is a super good minimal combo, and complementing with one wireless snooper is a really good idea too. For this video, we actually don't need detection to be really proper. We'll just have a couple of these so we're not completely blind. And if you would have to add like only one system more, I probably add a camera gimbal or camera tracker, because we're having a pretty like fast update speed here. The angular error is pretty low, but the range error is terrible. So where the range error comes in, the laser rangefinders are really good, super low, and the coincidence rangefinder is pretty good with range as well. But in any case, that's a little quick AI detection guide here. Just some general points so we don't glance over that completely. We're of course going to talk about AI routines and how to set up your AI. So I would think that it might be useful to start with a pretty simple AI to set up first. And we are going to place down the thrusters, the ion thrusters, wherever we might find it useful, and hopefully we can actually leave them there for the entirety of this video. So here we have a backwards facing one, just like that. We're going to have one forwards facing there and forwards facing there. Now, we may... Yeah, we can begin with this, and we're not gonna have like rudders for this thing. That's a little bit basic, I feel like, but it's of course they're just controlling yaw as easily as that. But usually you need a little bit more thrust to be able to turn around easily. So we're gonna have ion thrusters for turning like that. We're gonna begin with setting up a boat type of craft. Now, for this type of boat, we have forwards propulsion like this. That's nice. We can turn, and we should go into here and find a behavior. Now, this behavior can be set up in different ways depending on what type of ship we have. Circle at distance, we'll need to click on it to activate it, and we have a certain combat distance. Can be a pretty useful settings for this application. Just circle at distance, very easy. If you have a one-sider, you of course need to make sure to set the right side or left side only here, but we're gonna set it to just use both sides. Here under adjustments, you can find type of vehicle. This is a boat, so we're gonna have on water pathfinding, so we can avoid other ships. We don't having a ramming capabilities, so we want to avoid enemies as well. But if you are having a ram, you need to uncheck avoid enemies, of course. Here we have altitude avoidance. This is, of course, nothing we can use, so we're gonna ignore that. We have a bearing avoidance, we can steer away. 5 seconds is probably a bit short, maybe 15 seconds for this little boat. It's still gonna be pretty slow, you know. Very safe and sorry there. And here we have pathfinding avoidance. Consider the path of other vehicles. Is pre-checked for a reason. This is the minimum altitude above land that we can use. Obviously, we can't go above land here. We don't have a... We're building a boat. Here we have minimum altitude above water. And this is relative to the AI here, so it can be a little bit tricky. You can see we have altitude of 0. So that's good to know. If we have an altitude of 0, we can set it up to be relative to that point. So the minimum altitude above water, you know, we don't want it to sink if we have altitude control later, but we of course like can set it to a negative like value because we don't need it to fight to get above the surface over like 5 meters, then it's probably fine. So if you have a thing that can crash into the water, that's useful. Max altitude is how high we can go or are allowed to go. Now we're using ion thrusters, so if we set up an altitude control, this actually might be a problem, so we should probably set this to so that we're not able to go over. If your current altitude for your boat is actually not listed as you would think it is, it's because the AI may be placed a little bit underwater or a little bit over water, and that will be a relative to the point. So your like passive floating point should of course decide. Now there are some other ways to set this up using PIDs, which we're going to do a little bit later, but first we need to go through the basics. As you may have noticed, our ship actually doesn't have the ability to go backwards. So if we click C and go in here, if we can't go backwards, we'll need to uncheck allow reverse. Upwind pathfinding should be checked indeed. If we are using a vehicle that is basically based to use like sails mostly, it can be a good idea to actually uncheck this. Right. If you can go reverse using water propellers, by the way, of course, this should be checked. I would uncheck allow reverse for big battleships because you don't want them to start go reverse or start escaping from a battle and stuff like that. That's usually bad for really big ships because they're so slow. Right. Water depth required. That's something that's pretty relevant to check too. We can see that this one probably doesn't stick down very far into the water. We are probably honestly only needing about 5 water, like 5 meters depth. But it's a little bit stupid, this AI, so let's set that to 20 instead. It's probably a safer metric, so we don't get on land, because then we're gonna die. The turning circle, this is basically how much area you need to turn. So if we go into this little boat here, we need to have a little vehicle controller on it, like this. And we are going to drive it. And now we haven't set up anything, basically, like this. And we are basically trying to make an approximation. How much space do we need to be able to turn into a circle? And we can see here that if we are trying to do a little turning circle, this little ship can actually turn pretty spot on. So most likely, if we check a ship like this, we can just see that this is about 37 meter long, and it can basically turn on a dime. And from the depth, turn on a dime is probably a turning circle of 50 meters. That's probably very well set up. But yeah, you can fine-tune that value for larger ships. This is probably going to be like 1,000 meters, you know? But in this case, I think maybe 45 might be a fine value. This will decide how it moves and tries to maneuver and stuff like that. Okay. And this is the time used to estimate the terrain height in the future. 2 seconds. It will probe every 2 seconds. This is fine for this. If you're having a really fast vehicle, you might need to turn this one down to like 0.5 at least. Otherwise, you might run into some problems. Here we have the values for the battle AI here. Altitude relative to sea level. We can click ignore altitude here because we are a ship. We should ignore altitude. so that we don't try to do that. Inside of here, you can see we have the distance we should perform combat at and the approach angle. If we don't want to like go and attack a vehicle dead on, we can leave it at where it was. But if we're fine at basically going dead on towards the vehicle before we start circling, we can change this value here. Max roll to target. So if we have an aircraft, we can roll to target, which can be useful to aim the guns. But yeah, in this case, it's not the setting we want to use, so we are going to uncheck roll to target. Okay, use both sides. Then we can go over to the maneuver. This is a ship or tank. So we're going to check and say this is a ship or tank. Here we have wandering distance, basically idling around a completed waypoint. It can be nice to bump this up a little bit so that you don't need to use active propulsion for your ship when just making it stay at a approximate place, especially for things that are floating, drifting around a little bit, who cares? Or complete distance, if we are not very accurate, which we're usually not, it can be a little bit good to have it at, you know, some leeway, you know. We are not allowing hover, but we are allowing use pitch control. This can be useful to set to 0. If we have pitchers, we can basically use them, make him pitch. In any case, we also have a little idle distance here. So that can also be a good idea to set that something so we can drift a little bit from there. Yeah, well, that's basically those settings here. This is more of a PID editor here. We have some built-in PIDs into the AI, so these are like shortcuts rather than settings. Here we have a troubleshooting checklist. You know, this doesn't do much. Don't click reset though when you're done with setting up if you don't want to set up more. Yeah, that's the better. We have additional routines. Not quite useful for this. We have sailing, of course, but yeah, I think we can't cover everything, can we? Nah, I don't think a lot of people use that. We have an old sailing boat tutorial too. You can check it out. It's still valid. We can make a new instant one if you request this. Right now, we don't need to care about the PIDs. And we are basically done. So here we can select a name. With that, I would like to say huge thanks to all the commissioned officers in the army of GMODISM who are supporting us every month at Patreon. Big thanks then to especially Commodore Owen, Captain Shuro, Commander Morden, Lieutenants Anto, Cravey, Drew Candobetta, Flowerstagen, Powered by Greed, Venstvertars, Rick Proel and Scooby Rocks, all our cadets, and of course, the Ecclesiarchy of GMODISM YouTube members, and you have early access to videos, as you know. You should name your AI naturally, so we are going to name it Lieutenant Rick then. If you have multiple AIs, like one for targeting and one for something else, set one to higher priority where you set up the movement properly so it will actually go. Inside of here, we can make our life a little bit easier and just click basic configuration on them there. So now we have our little boat here. This is a Turner preset. You can see it's set up here. And this is of course jaw left or right. If it glows red, it means that the vehicle thinks it's reversed. It's not always right about that, but it's usually right about that. So if this is glowing red somewhere, and remember, this is a little bit annoying, but if you have a symmetry plane here, and you set this up to be a Turner preset, and you go to this one, it doesn't mean that this value is set up automatically. It's not like changed So if I set this to a pusher preset, even though I have a symmetry plane, this is not the pusher preset. And if I set this to be a turner preset, copy this and paste it on this one, it would actually show their like reverse value. So yeah, they need to be set up individually. That's what I'm trying to say. Up here, I'm going to show you one of the like first hacks or whatever. This is set to a pusher preset, right? So you can drag this here, but it could also be a turner preset. We could jaw right with this, and we can go forwards with this. So we can set it to be both forward and jaw. Isn't that quite nice? And we can go to this one. We can set it to go forward and to jaw, but the other way, of course. If we don't want these to activate like too much, we can set the forward like to like half, so it doesn't activate fully for forward maneuver, but definitely activates fully for jawing. Jaw is of course turning left and right. These ones are turner preset naturally, so we're gonna use these as a rudder. We could add a rudder to this thing too. This is a pusher preset, so we can go forwards basically. If we go and control this vehicle here, we are going to sit here. We can go forwards using our propulsion, and we can steer left, right, 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 left, 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 and just go forwards like this. Not very fast, but definitely safely. So this is how to set up a boat, basically. Yeah. If we have an enemy here, we're gonna turn on God mode. And just to kind of show you, we're gonna have a all-in-one local weapon controller there. And we're going to have a simple weapon. So you can see if, for example, we had a little, I don't know, a shard cannon perhaps. We're just gonna have a tiny little AA gun like this. Beautiful. And if we go and spawn a rat very far into the distance, and if we're not controlling the vehicle, we can see this little 50 cal go, try to target this enemy. We are approaching the rat with a almost dead angle. Of course, we set it to have at least 6 degrees of added bearing, so it won't go exactly straight at it. If we set minimum approach angle to 90, it would basically not be able to go towards an enemy in combat. Well, this is usually how to set up a boat then. Let's see, what are we gonna set up next? I think perhaps... You know what? I think we're gonna make a very basic submarine. And like a small and basic submarine doesn't need to be very complex at all. We can just set up some like really basic and easy stuff. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're going to be mindful of the center of mass. And we are going to provide a little box of lead, which will actually make this boat sink. Like this. But we're gonna make it float again any moment. Gonna have some of these. I don't think we'll need to overdo it. Perfect. Here we have a closed little box. We are gonna sink with this little box. Now inside of here, we are going to go to water tab. And we're gonna have an air pump inside of here. This air pump will be set to strafe and hover. So this is going to be hover. This is one when we go upwards. So if we go inside of here, you can see that this is set to 1, and this is then making us float a little bit. Naturally, we need to set up the AI for this then. So here we have a circle at distance. We can change this behavior if we want to. But honestly, this is the optimal setting for this type of vehicle, so we're gonna leave it there. Right here, we are wanting to avoid allies and enemies. We're gonna add altitude avoidance as well, because of course we can always go under a vehicle, a friendly vehicle, to not hit it as well. And this is gonna take longer time, so we probably want to set this to a little bit higher. Minimum altitude above land and above water. You know, this is like the minimum altitude, so we don't want to have this. We want to have like really low, because otherwise we won't be able to submerge. And max altitude, we can leave it as is. Reverse may be useful to allow in this case if we add the ability to go reverse. So that we're going to add. We are going to have we are going to have an altitude. We're going to have an attitude. We're going to have an altitude relative to sea level. And the combat altitude, we want it to be -50, because of course, when we are in combat, we want this to go underwater. This is very useful. We can have a higher combat distance. Submarines, unless they're melee submarines, usually don't go that close. Right. Otherwise, we have a pretty similar vehicle, honestly. So if you go to maneuver, ship or tank, we could add some other type of maneuver here. For example, 6-axis if we set it up in another way, or even hover movement. But this is not quite right for this. Ship or tank, what we already had, is very useful. We can have pitch control there. We don't have a way to use it right now, however, but there we have that. And we've got additional routines, which is still not relevant. So here, this is basically the configuration which we can use for this. However, one thing that I almost missed, which is good I caught now, is that in the vehicle menu here, when you save your vehicle, you need to set up one last thing. Set the designates your vehicle force. It's a land vehicle. Is it an all-terrain vehicle, like move on water and land? Or is it a sea vehicle? You want to set it as a sea vehicle. This is of course applicable to the previous little setup we had as well, but it's also of course useful for this submarine as well. Otherwise it will be a little bit weird. As we can see, we are right now a little bit heavy. We are having some troubles staying upright. So we can switch some of those lead blocks in the front here with some wooden blocks, and we can see we are keeping it straight instead. And now we are even having the ability to gain some altitude. And if you check this here, we have this pump which is set to float up a little bit there as well. So then it will try to adjust some type of altitude. Anyhow, these are basically the settings we need to do there. We could set it up a little bit more in case we wanted it to be, I don't know, usable in like have a specific altitude on, I don't know, when it's out of combat or into combat. We can check about that a little bit later. For this vehicle, in any case, it can be a good idea to have some kind of rubber protection so that you don't run into things accidentally. So if you add some rubber, you won't cause like collision damage. You probably want to stay a little bit careful. So that is something that can be added, especially for submarines, in case you are bumping into the bottom of the ocean or whatever. It doesn't matter, you know. if you're protected against it. Otherwise, you might want to set up your settings a little bit more so that you are never have the risk of bumping into the ocean or anything like this. Anyways, this should now be set up like this. Hopefully, that also means that if we spawn a little enemy here, the pump here inside of this is going to be submerging. And yeah, then we have this little option we glanced over previously, which is allow hover. If we don't have allow hover checked, it won't even try to hover or go down or up, control the altitude at all. So allow hover is a good idea to set here, otherwise it won't work. Also, pumps by default have a resting value of 1 that can be set to 0 instead, so we can work on setting its altitude, whatever it wants to be. And if we spawn a enemy now, it should go downwards in case it detects it. You can see it's inside of here. It's even turned off, so it will go down into the water faster to reach the target altitude of -50 meters to engage in some combat. So that is basically how to set up a submarine, but you may not want to fine-tune the pitch and whatever. So this is a perfect opportunity we have to add roll and pitch controls. We're going to go into this, the one here. We can actually have 1 there and 1 here, 1 there and 1 here. This is gonna be set like automatic control. You can have this on if you want to. It will just like automatically control altitude and like everything. It will just work basically, but it will work kind of bad. So honestly, I wouldn't use this. I would set off for all propulsion, because if you have this on, it's going to do more than it's going to activate more than it has to. What we want to do here is set roller preset and set hover up and down, so we can go up and down with this. Same for this, roller preset and hover to the right area there. This one is a roller preset and pusher up and down, so it goes green like this. Perfect. Now we are roll stabilized, and we can also go up and down automatically, which is super handy. Right, we want to control pitch as well, so we are going to set it as a pitcher preset. We might as well have it as a going up little thruster. Can have this one here, pitcher preset, going up as well. So now we can see we're staying on a much more stable, exactly -50. And if we remove our enemy vehicles, you can see at it goes back to a more reasonable altitude and chilling there in the meanwhile, like that. Also, if you have a submarine, as I said before, passive sonar, active sonar can be a good idea to have in there. Otherwise, it will be hard for you to target the enemy ship or whatever you're facing. About that, this is not a weapon guide. That will be a separate future video, but just a little bit quickly. All-in-one local weapon controller. This gun. So, to not waste materials, can this hit things that are underwater? No, not really. This is not a gun made for that. Can this thing hit things like are 2,000 meters up in the air? Like, probably not. Not if we, as long as we are not able to go up in the air. We can't. Can we reach 5,000 meters? No, we can't. We might as well set it to like 1,800 or whatever. Otherwise, we're gonna waste a lot of like materials just shooting guns that can't even hit. And here we have the different channels and the built-in failsafe too, which you can set up here a little bit. Now, we maybe don't need that much of a margin. We can turn it down. if this is some kind of doomsday weapon, maybe you want to increase that margin a little bit. Yeah, I think we're gonna airship instead. So we're gonna do a armor refit. We're gonna switch lead to alloy or wood. That. So now this is a wooden box instead. Inside of here, this air pump is gonna be removed, and we're gonna go here and place a helium pump instead. This is going to be set to hover up and down as well. So it can be used for some lift help. Now we need a pretty big tank to be able to lift completely. Like for example, if we go in here and set this to a resting value of 1, I don't think we will fly. Reset, set it to 1. But almost, we're pretty light. We're not flying, but we're close enough. We're going to set this to a hover command instead. And we are going to add some more thrusters. So, to provide some upward thrust, locate your center of mass, place a thruster beneath it, have it be a pusher preset, which is upwards like that. Propellers or whatever you want to use. It's also possible that your pitchers might be a little bit weak, especially since ion thrusters ain't the best. So we can go up and down. We're gonna add one there and one there. Up and down. Pitch and down, I mean. Right, so now we need some new settings. And honestly, I kind of prefer to use the ship one for airships as well. So we're just going to change this here, that the minimum altitude is, I don't know, 10 meters. And the maximum altitude is like, I don't know, 100, like a low flying one. Above land, that's dangerous, 50 meters at least. We're gonna be a little bit faster. We can tune this down a little bit. We don't want to collide with stuff. This is gonna be changed in air to in air for collision avoidance. And yeah, combat altitude will be set to 1, maybe like 90, something like that. Whatever, it's not that important. And here we also have idle pitch angle. If you wanted to pitch up a little bit when going, it can be useful for hydrofoils, so that can be set up there. Hydrofoils basically like ships, you know, don't have a altitude setting basically. Yeah, a lot of fine tuning, but really easy. But I feel that's probably more like a separate detailed tutorial. Okay. So here we are an airship here. We can't go very low. We can go very low, but we can't go very high. Easily set up like this. It's as basic as this. And we can control turning around like that. Very nice, like a proper airship. And this thing here is of course also setting the buoyancy a little bit here. So if we spawn an enemy using this, gonna spawn a little rat again. You can see here, if we set this, we can actually pin this. You can see that the buoyancy factor is, well, instantly set higher than lower because, of course, we're using thrust to get up here. Now, this thing is taking some thrust and thus some power to even activate. So, if you can't fly with your helium pump alone anyways, you might actually as well set this to a resting value of 1, and that will automatically offload the thrusters. You can see it uses a lot less power because this one is using free power. So that can be pretty useful. Yeah. And now we can see we're snaking a little bit here. This ain't nice. So we need to go into our vehicle. We need to go to PIDs. We are snaking. That is a jaw. Turn down the gain here a little bit until you stop snaking. So usually that can be a pretty low value for really small and light ships like this. And do the same for roll and pitch. And if you're having trouble of even providing a good yaw and a good roll, like a good strong pitch, good strong yaw, good strong roll, then you should increase the gain. That's pretty useful. Now, we have a little annoying thing that is called we take control over the vehicle. Oh, and we're going forwards, and oh no, we're crashing altitude, stuff is happening, nothing is working, mayday, mayday. We can do nothing. We don't want that to happen. So what we need to do is we need to go to control, we need to go to general PID, and I'm gonna slap down one here. This is gonna be propulsion vertical. And we are going to set that to a reasonable value and a little set point change. Adjust the set point by adding this constant value to it. Set it to 0 to ignore. This addition is done before the optional multiplication. So we can basically set this. What value do we want? Like 20 or something like that. Maybe like 50. And this will actually override the altitude of the AI. The PID has a higher value like this. So this is propulsion vertical, and the input signal is going to be altitude above terrain or waves. Like this. So now it's going to set our altitude to a specific value here. And we can do the same for more PIDs here. So we're going to have roll. And we're gonna have a roll. Perfect. We don't need to set up more. Maybe we can change the gain a little bit here. And here again, we're gonna have pitch, and we're going to have input pitch is gonna be pitch. Now we actually messed that up. That's pretty funny because we fell down into the water. And there you have it. Now we don't have any materials. That's why we fell down. I thought it was a little bit weird that we just fell down that quick. Can add another one there. So now when we are taking control over this vehicle, we are actually, the PIDs are going to handle the altitude, they're going to handle the roll, they're going to handle the pitch. So now I can steer this thing peacefully without needing to worry about anything. Very handy. And as soon as I release this control, the AI is going to take over and set it to the proper combat altitude, which it prefers to have. Yeah, very nice. But when you are controlling the vehicle, you're not going to override the general purpose PID. So that's pretty handy to have them here. And if you want some custom value and custom combat altitudes and stuff like that, that kind of differs, you can set it up using ACBs, but I think that might be a little bit over course. We should probably just move on to the next vehicle type instead. So, these are gonna go away, and the enemies will too. We're gonna make a hovercraft. This thing is of course just set on all the time. And now, this one is not only gonna be a turner, it's also gonna be a strafe. So now we need to think a little bit. If this goes forward, are we strafing left or right? We are strafing right. And this one too, strafe, you can see we have the green and red values here. They are still working for this. So here, strafe left and strafe left. So now we are basically going strafing up and down and left and stuff like this. And a vehicle like this should obviously be able to go backwards. So this is a pusher preset to go backwards. That's reasonable. And now we have a new vehicle type we can basically set up. So, circle at distance may not be the right one here. Instead, it could be a smart idea to have point at, maintain distance, max pitch to target. This can be a little bit more. We're pretty light and maneuverable. Yeah, disabled pitch above azimuth. So we can do that if we don't want it to pitch too much when we are having outside a certain bound, basically. In any case, combat altitude, you can see it's much higher here. And combat distance, 1000 can be smaller, but combat altitude, we can turn it to, I don't know, doesn't actually matter very much. Don't retreat when too close can be a good idea if you don't want it to run away, because perhaps you are not very well armored in the back. It's better that it's too close. Then you can check this box, otherwise you don't need. Okay, relative altitude to sea level is probably fine there. And we are in air still, of course. Look ahead bearing should be a little bit higher. This doesn't need to be that high. Avoid allies, avoid enemies. Minimum altitude above land. Water, we can have this a little higher. Max altitude can go a lot higher too. Okay, I think that will be pretty fine. Then we go to... oh, yeah. I think we didn't set this up here. It's not like a game breaker, so that's why it's easy to forget. When you switch vehicle types, remember to set them here. So, yeah.
Airborne at your service.
Terrain height is less than the vehicle's maximum altitude. Yeah, so otherwise you might collide into stuff, you know. Expensive mistakes if you forget that before you save your vehicles. It's a good idea to set that up when you have them and spawn them in game. Maybe then some modifications or whatever. In any case, we're going to go to maneuver. Here we have ship or tank. We're going to have another maneuver. And this time we are going to have a hover movement. A hover movement is basically the hovercraft. So we have max pitch forward backwards movement. If we're able to go faster, if we pitch forward, we can actually set it to pitch a little bit forward when going forwards, just because perhaps we have our main propulsion being vertical. This is just almost true, but I think we can go a little bit faster if we pitch forward and backward. And of course, we can roll left and right to kind of go sideways and strafe a little bit too. We can have a little bit of that too. Can be a good idea. Hover movement and 6-axis can be pretty similar. And we get a lot of warnings here, and that's because yes, we can strafe, yes, we can turn on the spot, yes, we can reverse, yes, we can fly, yes, we can be stationary. Okay, we all know that. That's just a checklist. Obviously, if we have set this thing to not go backwards in the particular AI we are using, it can be a good idea to have it here. By the way, for a lot of aircraft and stuff like that, we have something inside. Here we have like an extra routine card, or actually here we have an extra routine card. And this means that we can go and set up an extra routine, like water start. So if we are below, I don't know, 11 meters and stop at 28 meters or something like that, we could set it up to basically deploy hot air balloons to get us out of the water, which can be useful for aircrafts. So if we, for example, go down here and then we let the AI take control, you can see the hot air balloons are helping us getting out of the water. So that's like the additional routine is doing. One of them. Anyways, this is the hovercraft. You can see it's a completely different breed. It moves around like this. It pitches like a helicopter. It can strafe. We're already strafing a little bit here. Targeting in on the enemy. We're set to point at the enemy. So this is good if we have like forwards mounted guns and stuff like this. It can be really useful to have that kind of setup. Yeah. Aircraft and stuff can be a little bit similar, as well as the 6-axis. So if we instead have 6, no. If we instead have a 6 axis here, we can set it up. We are all checked. Look ahead distance, maybe a little bit longer. Wander distance, yeah, we can increase that a little bit. Yeah. So now we're having a very different type of vehicle, strafing, moving around in all sorts of directions and ways. This is of course point at, so maybe not super useful. 6 axis can be used for almost anything if you have the propulsion in all those directions, but you know, I kind of think of it a little bit as a satellite type of setup. Yeah, we're going to make an airplane out of this too, and it says that the vehicle is too good, it's not very useful, but let's select the airplane 2.0. We can have an idle thrust. We don't need to be able to hover using this, but we can. And if we have an airplane, we can instead of point at, we can instead have like attack run with flyover or U-turn. Something like that. We don't need that high. Yeah, altitude relative to sea level, fantastic. Activate this. And maneuver, airplane 2.0, wander distance, fine. Can increase this a little bit. Have a pretty slow idle thrust. Decrease the pitch a little bit. Yeah, that's absolutely useful. So if we have an airplane, we should, but we don't have to, have lift. So if we, for example, just have wings here, can at least see the lift show up on the menu. If you go forwards, we're gaining some lift, and now we are technically an airplane. So we are going to fly towards the target and like fly over, shoot stuff, do a U-turn, come back, and like that. Pretty basic like that. Man, I think that's almost all vehicles, right? If you're wanting to have a really big battleship that's kind of good and don't mess up too often, I find that broadside is pretty useful. But, you know, set it up to something big like this. And when we're having really big ships, it's pretty important that we set them to... like if we have a broadside here, we should start the broadside when we are like below a pretty high value. So say that we are below like 3,000 meters or whatever, and we can start closing in. That's basically the max allowed distance for that type of battle. In Nether, you can set it to max, but if your broadside guns can reach that long, I should say. If you're having like 64 pounders, you will need to tune this down to pretty close combat. Yeah, just so you know. Well, I think that was everything, and I hope that was useful for you. If it was, please leave a like and do subscribe for future videos. You can post the suggestions in the comments if you want some specific videos, and of course, go to the community page here on YouTube and vote and give your opinions on a lot of different things. Other than that, thanks a lot for watching. This is your host, Eric of GMODISM. I'm signing out, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Also, check my other channels above. They still need those support subscribers. Anyways, see you next time. I'm Eric of GMODISM is signing out.